Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of CIT 142. We're going to get right into some theory on level design with this week's topic: what is a level? We're going to go over some of the basic concepts of the construction of a level, and then afterwards, I'm going to kind of show you a little bit of my documentation process when doing level design. So that you can see kind of where we start with levels and um, the end result. So first up, let's talk about the important aspects of um, game levels. So when you're designing a level, these are things that you have to consider while you are building the level out. Um, First, you have to talk about space, which is the physical environment. That is your 3D space, or in the case of 2D games, 2D space, that the uh, level will be placed inside. Um, the basic concept is that you give yourself enough space to design everything that you want within the confines of the level, and that you give the player enough space to be able to interact with the level the way that you want them to. Next up, we have mechanics. These are things that, on a higher level of game design, are the rules and systems that run the game. So your um, your combat mechanics, or the movement, whether jumping and running and different movement abilities, things like that. And it's important to keep those in mind when designing levels, especially when you're designing puzzles or challenges, to make sure that they are things that are possible for the player to accomplish. Um, Next up, we have story, which is fairly self-explanatory. You want to make sure that your level design flows in a way that um, is complementary to the story you're trying to tell, whether it's having points within the level for cutscenes or for story beats, or whether you're using environmental storytelling to create a bit of world building. The style of the objects in your world, the NPCs that inhabit the level, and the enemies that you face, all of which just you need to be cognizant of the overarching story that you're trying to tell within that level. And then the last piece that we have to be aware of while we're designing levels is the challenges that the players face in the level: obstacles, puzzles, um, enemies, and combat. Anything that is kind of the crux of the action in the level, what the player is trying to, or player has to do to complete the level. So let's talk about physically within the space what things um, are important in level design. What are the different parts of of an actual level design? Um, First one is objectives, things that the player has to achieve to complete the level. Whether it's a game like Mario, where your objective is to get from the beginning of the level to the end of the level within a time limit, or if it's something more complex like a dungeon in an MMORPG where you have to beat the boss to finish the level. Um, the objectives are the first thing that that you have to place in the level when you're creating it. Um, Next is enemies. Any kind of enemies that the player is going to have to fight or get past, depending on the mechanics of your game. We have to make sure that those are properly placed within the level space. Next up is obstacles. Your puzzles and obstacles and things like that players have to overcome. This can also be the physical objects that fill the space, your buildings, or scenery and landscaping, things that the player is can interact with physically, but also things that may attempt to block the player from completing the level or getting through from start to finish. And then collectibles. So if the collectibles are kind of the last thing that we think about when we're designing levels, a lot of times we as game developers have kind of an idea of what collectibles and things we want to have the player search for if it's a open world game, similar to your like Assassin's Creeds and Horizon and Far Cry and stuff like that, like all of the different points of interest and little collectibles that you find along all over the map and stuff. Those are the things that we don't build the entire level around, but we keep in mind that we want to include these things. And a lot of times, especially in larger like open world adventure type games, Indiana Jones does this very well. The new Indiana Jones game, where the collectibles are hidden behind a challenge, or you have to complete a puzzle or beat a bad guy in order to get whatever that collectible is. These are things that was something that we want to keep ourselves aware of, that we need to include in our level, and make sure that we save room for those within our level. So physically, when we are looking at the spatial design of our level, we want to look at the way that we are laying out our objects, way that the paths and obstacles are laid out so that they make sense. We want to next is pathfinding. We want to make sure that there is a through line from beginning to end of a level, or from beginning to end of a zone, and to all of the points of interest throughout the level. Some of this comes through in QA, where you'll have testers making sure that every part of a level is accessible and interactable, and nothing is blocked off when it shouldn't be, or not blocked off when it should be, things like that. Pathfinding can also include guidance through a level. A big factor in level design, especially, it's probably the last 10 years or so, it's really gotten kind of in the forefront, is the yellow paint that you see. The yellow paint is actually a very, while some people don't like it because it may be immersion breaking, it's something that is very important to level design, because showing a player that they are able to interact with a ladder, climb up a wall, bust through a door, whatever the yellow paint or similar design features are showing the player, it's important that is communicated in a way that is visible and easily recognizable. In addition, it's also important for accessibility for players who may have hard time discerning colors or discerning having vision impairments. It's important to have something that is visible and clear for those players as well, to be able to not get completely lost and get frustrated. And that leads into visibility, which is making sure that the things that the player sees in front of them make sense, whether it's draw distance, to make sure that the player isn't looking off into nothing and thinking that they're about to run up on a ledge, or if it's fog of war, making sure that parts of the map that the player should have access to are visible, and ones that they shouldn't aren't visible yet. Want to make sure that when a player, it doesn't need to be obvious that a player is where a player is supposed to go in a level. That can be the challenge, is figuring out where you're supposed to go, but it needs to be discoverable. You need to be able to have some kind of clue that that's where the player is supposed to go, or that's the thing that the player is supposed to interact with. If we go back to, I'm going to show it real fast. I just realized I wasn't actually in slideshow mode. Oh well. We're just going to go with it. If you go back to a game like Mario, like the original Mario, there are a lot of secrets and things where you can boundary break and get under the floor or over the skyline in the game and go out of bounds. Those aren't core parts of the level design, but ways that secrets that can be found. It's okay if those aren't visible, but if something is necessary for a player to continue, they need to be able to tell that in some way that that's what they're supposed to do, whether it takes them a little while to find it versus it being plainly obvious. You can't just assume that a player is going to jump out into the darkness and expect to succeed in whatever they're doing. Not having those or having those invisible gotchas in level design can create frustration, especially if it's paired with certain camera angles and things that make it increasingly hard to, even if you were to figure out what the challenge was, to complete the challenge. So I want to make sure that you minimize those things and at least have some kind of visible marker for things, for progression points in a level. And finally, we want to talk balance, making sure that everything is balanced. Goes back to that as well, but also combat being in an appropriate difficulty, puzzles being appropriately appropriately positioned so that if it's a game like a Legend of Zelda, where you need certain tools or items to be able to complete certain parts of a puzzle, that you don't put that puzzle in places that impede player progression when it's impossible for them to continue. You just want to make sure that you're creating a fair and engaging experience with your level design. Okay. Had to restart the recording because there's a time limit for it. And I fixed the PowerPoint, so now we're actually in presentation mode. So next up, we want to talk about narrative and level design. So how our story is portrayed throughout the level. What themes, dialogue, and environment are the three major points. So the themes are your general design, the way that the objects in the level look, the lighting and the atmosphere, creating the correct theme for your level. So if you're going for a darker, grungier level design, whether it's you're in a game like a Bloodborne or whatever similar kind of dark experience, you want to make sure that your levels fit that theme without pulling the player out of the world that they're playing in. And then we talk about dialogue. So when you have characters in your level, whether it's enemies, NPCs, or your own player, having that dialogue, quips, and also actual dialogue between characters being thematic and correctly paced within the narrative of the level. And you want to make sure you have those points where those things trigger, make sense with the flow of the level. And then finally, environment. So environmental storytelling is a very powerful tool, something that is also very difficult to do well. If you are creating a narrative through environmental storytelling, you are showing the player these things. You're not telling the player that something is happening. You're showing it, whether it's the remnants of a battle as you're going through a battlefield and you see all sorts of destroyed tanks or monsters and stuff like that, similar to the fields in Hyrule in Breath of the Wild. in The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, where the ancient I can't remember what they're called, the Watchers, I think, the big robot spider things, they're all destroyed out there, and um, there are buildings that are in ruins, and there are siege engines and outposts and things that, when you look at it as a whole, as you're exploring it, you realize that there was a huge battle that took place in on this field, and you can tell through the environment itself how the result of that battle ended. Um, and also, I guess, in the case of Breath of the Wild, it is given to you through dialogue, but the first time you see it without having actually played through any parts of the game, you can tell that the good guys lost pretty pretty harshly there. Um, and that's all being done through objects and environmental aspects in the storytelling. Next up, we have progression and pacing, which is very important. It ties back into the mechanics and the spatial awareness of your level designs. So making sure that the difficulty is correct in a level, but overarching through multiple levels or through the course of a single level, that the difficulty is increasing properly. You don't want to make something too easy by showing it to a player in a puzzle, and then doing the same thing in the next puzzle, right? If it's a puzzle that requires a certain game mechanic, a lot of times you'll see games do kind of an intro of that, being like, this is how you would solve this. Let's say it's a pushing box puzzle where you have to push boxes into certain locations. The first time you do it, it'll probably be like push one or two boxes in a couple of spots. Then the next time you do it, it's more complex. The next time you do it, it's more complex. And eventually it gets to the point where the game trusts that the player understands the mechanics well enough to be able to really push that difficulty. So you want to make sure that things aren't front loaded in difficulty with players, and also that they don't stagnate over the course of your designs, to make sure that the players stay engaged. Next up is variety, mixing up your gameplay mechanics, making sure that everything isn't all the same enemy, or isn't all the same puzzle, or isn't all of the same actual design elements. If every single hold on, I'm gonna go back. If every single frame of or screen of a Mario level looked the same, it wouldn't be very engaging. The fact that they use a variety of blocks and pipes and enemies to create those challenges is what gives Mario levels that uh, engagement within the level. You also want to include rewards for completing levels, for completing challenges, providing reasons for players to want to finish your challenges that you've created, whether it's beating a boss and getting the loot from the boss, or finding a chest at the end of a puzzle, or finding a collectible. You want to make sure that these rewards are, one, meaningful to the player, and two, that they are progressively uh, at the correct scale with the point in the game that you're at. So if you're playing a an RPG type game that uses potions to heal, and you're getting regular potions at the beginning of the game for beating enemies, and then at the last dungeon of the game you get, like, you, instead of getting stronger potions, instead of getting that max potion or that Phoenix down, or you know um whatever fully heals the player, you're getting potions that give you minimal numbers of healing. That's going to feel really bad, because it's like, oh well, why did I care about doing this if my reward was going to be something that's completely useless to me? And then finally, we talk about pacing. Pacing is very important. Depending on the type of game that you're making, pacing can be the most important thing. You want to make sure that players are interacting with things at a clip that you want to see, but also you don't want players to either blow through things too quickly or um, stagnate and get stuck in places where when they shouldn't. Pacing is done very well. Mario is kind of the hallmark for video games when it comes to um, these basics in level design, but also Mario pacing is very very good, especially when it changes the variety of the challenges and things in ways that force the player to move faster. If you're underwater, or if you're in Mario Super Mario 3 when you have the levels in the desert where the sun is chasing you, like those things kind of force the player to keep at a certain pace. Um, at the same time, games like Sonic games, which are all about the pace and all about the speed of trying to complete levels in certain times and getting rewarded for increasing your speed. Um, the worst feeling in those types of games, especially in Sonic games, is when your momentum stops and the pace that you're all of a sudden having to search around for a way to continue in the level, and what you're supposed to be doing is running really fast and going from point to point um, without having to worry about being stuck in a certain spot. So pacing, very important to making sure that the levels are engaging and fun. And finally, let's talk a little bit more about our challenges. Puzzles. We've talked about these ad nauseum, but puzzles can be things that reward players for completing the puzzle, giving them collectibles or loot or useful items, story pieces, things like that. Puzzles can also be required to continue through a level as a major challenge to completing that level. Combat, which is probably the most common challenge that players face in video games. Combat needs to range from, or can range from, just general bad guys, elite monsters, and larger things, large groups of things. And the challenge there is to beat all of the monsters and not just one or two at a time. Waves, where you have multiple waves of enemies that you need to beat over and over again to get through an area, or bosses. And these encounters need to be, not everyone needs to be unique, right? Having a similar group of enemies multiple times in a level is totally fine, um, but they need to be varied enough that they're engaging. So you don't want to have a single Goomba in every screen in a Mario game, right? You want to have Koopas, you want to have Piranha Plants, you want to have Bullet Bills and things that challenge the player in different ways. Same thing in like say Elden Ring, where you don't want to have the same group of enemies show up every single time when you're in an encounter, because then it becomes easier and easier to beat them over time, and you learn their patterns and stuff, and it becomes trivial. And when a game like Elden Ring, or any kind of Souls like game where the point is the difficulty, the challenge is difficulty in combat, um, you want to make sure that you're giving the player those challenges in combat. And then there's boss fights. And if you're making a game where boss fights matter, where you have bleh, just said it, a Souls like game where you giant epic boss fights and stuff. You want to make sure that those are properly difficult and engaging for the player, and also um, varied enough that games don't survive so much anymore on the dodge three attacks, hit enemy, do that three times, beat enemy. The rule of three, um, not exactly the most engaging thing in modern gaming. So you want to make sure that if that's something that you want, that there's a reason for it, but otherwise that you're providing the right level of difficulty with boss encounters. Platforming also ties a little bit into environmental stuff, where if you have any kind of platforming, jumping, obstacles, climbing, um, any kind of movement puzzles and things like that, that these things are properly difficult, but also like not punishing, right? Um, Jumping puzzles, I think, are some of my least favorite things in games, um, because it feels incredibly bad when you're halfway through a jump puzzle and you miss a platform, and now you have to do the entire thing over again. Platformers in general are. I love Mario 64, but like the 2D Mario's can tend to drag for me because like it feels bad when you miss a jump. So you want to make sure that you're balancing those platforming difficulties with being cognizant of how the player is going to react to those feel bad moments. And then environmental, same thing. If you have environmental challenges, if you have rock walls to climb, or lava pits to get around and stuff like that, those again need to be designed in a way that is um, properly challenging, but also not frustrating. Which is kind of just the rule of thumb. Make sure that if you're designing a challenge or an obstacle in a game, make sure that it's properly challenging but not annoying. You don't want to discourage players from trying to complete your challenges, unless that's the point of the game, like in Elden Ring. I think that's everything. Yeah, that's everything for that. I'm gonna restart the recording, and I'm going to pull up some stuff, show you some of our game design documents and level design stuff to give you an idea of how to create levels on paper, and translate them into a level editor. So be right back. Okay, hi. We're back, and I'm going to show you a couple of Dogwood's game design documents and things that we have used to start our level designs. The first one I'm going to show you is for a game that we are currently working on with, or I guess Sam, Professor Martino, is currently working on in one of his courses with his class. I believe it's the game production course. And I don't know if anybody here took his class last semester, his game pre-production course, but he also started the game design work in that course. This is called Always Bet on Quack, which is a casino game featuring a bunch of cute ducks. And the level design in this game, there is a single open level. There are some instance things that we're working on as well, but there is a single open level, and it is the casino itself. So what we started with this design was kind of this block out, super simple floor map of like where we were going to put the different parts of the casino. So here we have the opening, the drive up to the entrance of the casino. There is going to be a parking lot here and a theater space here with some event stuff happening here. And then as you move into the casino itself through the lobby, you get into the actual casino floor. Our original design for this was this way to be more modular. So the idea was that from here we can add on additional rooms and additional games and things as we wanted to design them. And the important points of this is the way that the floor is laid out. This became kind of this is incredibly rudimentary line drawing here that was kind of to show a bit of the flow of the way that players were to go from one point to the other in the actual casino floor. So a lot of times you'll see in real casinos, you'll see this kind of circular idea of there being, I guess I don't know the official term for it, but it's like a pod where you have kind of different tables and things kind of in a circular section with admin type stuff in the center. So the idea was that you would go from the entrance into over here, from the entrance into the casino floor, and you would go around and run into some roulette tables and then some slots and then some blackjack and then back around into some more roulette, and then you'd leave. And the idea for players, for people inside of the casino, is for them to travel from, station to station and do the games that they want to do and see more of the games before they leave, to try to get people to play more as they go through. That's the idea of how it works in a casino. So what we did is we took this, and we this is still in development and still very early on, but we took this and put it in to practice in this level. So let me go full screen here. So as I go through this is made in Unreal Engine, which will show a bit more of that as as the course goes on. But for now, this is the idea of, you have your driveway, your promenade entrance into, excuse the the mess. We've been testing some of our casino games and stuff in the actual level, but you go into the atrium, the lobby area. So we're here now. We have reception on the left, and we have these event spaces on the right. So right now we have the hallway, or the reception area here, and then over here, which it's not currently built, but if I go unlit real fast, you'll see that this is the space meant for the theater, and then this back here is meant for events, and that's all still being constructed. And then we get further back into the actual space where the casino games and tables and slot machines and everything are going to be. So what we did was take from this very basic design. We went and did a block out inside of Unreal with basic walls and shapes and things that we wanted to do, blocked everything out, and then went in and started to add in the actual assets and materials that we wanted to use. So that's how you start basic. Also, I'm in the oops, that's my Steam. In the always in the floor model, you'll see there's like this parking lot area. This is something that is currently, there's nothing here, and we've actually blocked it off. We're using a bit of environmental storytelling to show that this is still under construction. There is also a lot more here. Most of this is all background. It was just us filling out the space, and a lot of time you'll do that. This is, I guess you consider it a bit more environmental storytelling when you're trying to show what the environment around the map, around the level itself is. And for us, it's a casino town. It's a Las Vegas type clone, but with ducks. So next up, we have here's a fun one. Okay, so several years ago, we were working on a game. It is a remake of our first game that we released, was called Ashes of Kanaka, and we were working on a 3D remake of it using Unreal Engine. So one of the things that we had to do was redesign the first area of the game. Everything in it. Ashes of Kanaka was a JRPG originally created in RPG Maker. So we have to translate kind of everything that was in 2D into 3D and make it in a way that flows well for the player. So in this map, you'll see it's a similar kind of idea to the Always Bet on Quack one, where we have this block out. But one of the other things that we've done here is we blocked out where all the important buildings are in the map, and also pathways to and from those buildings. So this map has, we have our legend down here. We have our buildings players can enter, which are all the green buildings. These have to have interiors, which we will develop or would develop as we went through after the exterior of everything was designed. We have hidden items, so we've placed where our hidden items, our collectibles and things are um, on the map, so we know kind of that we have to have the right amount of space and whatever the interactable is to get those things in those locations. We have shops, which are the locations where the players will be able to buy things. Some of these shops, like the night market, for instance, is a much larger open air kind of market. So you'll have interiors in there where the player will be able to interact. The arrows will show the player's progression path throughout the level. So the idea was you were to start here in the Los Postres HQ and or the OAS Los Postres HQ, and from there your progression was going from there to the Silver Tower, and then from the Silver Tower to multiple locations, from the sewer entrance, which was the first dungeon, to the Wedding Chapel and the Demon Heads and Maiden Bed Strip Club, which were both locations that were story points happened, and then from there back to the Silver Tower for the last part of the level. But this is also an open world map, so you were able to explore every part of it as much as you wanted, and that meant that we were going to have these paths to allow the player to navigate through the map, and that's what the purple is, the footpaths. So this all kind of developed, and I don't have the game files available on this computer right now. Otherwise, I'd show you how the map final came out, and I will, if you're interested, I will find that and pull that up for you guys. But this all kind of resulted in this rough cut trailer, which might actually be frozen now, thanks Windows Media Player. Give me one sec. Okay, we're back. There we go. So these areas and things were built out from this 2D drawing into what this is a market square. This is, I believe, let me go back. This is, I believe, right around here. This is the sewer area. It's a different part of the map. And then different parts, different maps, things like that. Let's go back to the tower. There's your Silver Tower, which is kind of the focal point of the entire map. And so it was built out with the original block out in mind, and built into an entire city. This map is pretty large, as it was. So, yeah, and also we have some references from the original Los Postres map here, the way that it looks in our RPG Maker version. So here is your Silver Tower. Here are your two. Here's your strip club, I think. That's the bar. This is the entrance to the night market. That's a shrine, rather. Yeah. So this is kind of the. Actually, I think. Oops. Yeah, I think this is the entrance to the night market. Anyway, these are the layout from the original game, and then we translated it into this for the remake. So that's kind of how you go about building your initial design, and then translating it from paper into the level editor space. Just wanted to show you guys that so that you have an idea of what you're going to be doing. This week's oops, did not mean to hit pause. This week's where is the syllabus? Yeah, there we go. All right. This week's level or the assignments and stuff for the course are we are going to start with, it's called Design a Level on Paper. And similarly to this, this is kind of what I want you to do, is just a drawing of a level from top down. If you're doing like a 3-dimensional thing, this makes sense. If you want to just kind of lay out where things are in your map. If you're doing more of a 2D thing, maybe you draw it to look more like if it's a platformer or whatever, make it look more like a Mario level. Whatever makes sense for you. And I will post all of that tonight with more explanation in the course space. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you, everybody. And I will see you guys next week.